First of all, I want to say that this material, 90% of this material was given to us by a very special person who is a retired police chief in the state of Georgia, who on his own has developed 3 days worth of training for police. So this is a police chief, retired, former military police in the U.S. Army, lieutenant colonel, retired, who understands what a policeman does every day and how he risks his life, what it's like to be a family member of police, and he understands the way the sheriff's departments work with police chiefs and so on. The material you're going to see, think about it as something that a policeman in Alabama would go to a training session and see this material for the first time. I was fortunate enough to travel to Alabama to sit for 12 hours with the Lee County Sheriff's Department, and I'm going to go forward just for a second. I got a certificate. I took the class, so I just wanted you to be aware of it. That's why I can talk to this material. Also on that certificate, you will see that the individual officers got 8 hours of training. So this training is certified in Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. It's been presented to 30 different counties. And the reason I mention that is, in general, this material has not been available outside of, generally available in most of the United States. Why? Well, the one word on the top of the screen is Sharia. We were told over the last 8 years that police, FBI, Department of Defense, CIA cannot train their individuals using the word Sharia or jihad or hijra or any of the other words that we're going to talk about directly. So think about the fact that you're a policeman and you've never seen this. This information's been available very, very scarcely, and now you're learning this for the first time in, let's say, 8 years. All right, so we're going to talk about Sharia. Sharia, Islamic law is Sharia. So you can either say Sharia law, which is a little bit redundant because Sharia by itself is law, it means law. And we're talking about why do we care? Well, we care because we actually you live in Shariaville. We all do. Michigan has a critical mass of immigration, legal and illegal. We have 40 and 50 years of immigration from parts of the world where people practice Sharia. They come here and they practice Sharia. And there are 140 mosques in the state of Michigan, over 3,000 in the United States, and those mosques, vast majority of them in Michigan are Sunni mosques. They may be Shia mosques. However, Sharia is what is taught, and that's the principles of how to behave, how to live your life. That is part of the Sharia bills. The other reason we mention it is that we've been recognized in Michigan in multiple books. This is Stealth Invasion by Leo Holman. This book is called No-Go Zones by Raheem Kassam, who writes for Breitbart. This gentleman writes for WorldNet Daily. Both of them have focused in their articles on the state of Michigan, specifically Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne County, specifically Sterling Heights. And there's 35 pages in this book on us, on Michigan, and there's multiple references in the index here. So we have more than enough evidence that we live in Shariaville. We live near even denser populations, of course, like Hamtramck. There's no reason even to mention Dearborn. The whole world knows about Dearborn. You may not know that Sterling Heights and Warren, parts of Madison Heights. I live in Rochester Hills. We definitely have Shariavilles in all of those communities, and that's why it's important for women to understand what happens to a woman. The women in this room, by definition, are not equal to the men in this room, according to Sharia. So your children, your daughters, are not equal to the men in the communities they live in, and your grandchildren are also not equal. And so Sharia law does not just apply to women in the Islamic community. Sharia applies to all women. So Sharia applies to the non-Muslim community as well. Okay. This material, developed again by our retired police chief, is diligently referenced from the Quran, from the Hadith, which is the sayings that Muhammad, about Muhammad, and one of the key definitions of what is Sharia is in a book called The Reliance of the Traveler. So we have some quotes here. Again, I am not a Quranic scholar, so I will not be able to delve deeply into the Quranic references, but the police chief does. All right, so is it even possible for us to have this conversation? Isn't Islam, and therefore Sharia, a religion protected by the First Amendment? To be honest with you, there are parts of course, Islam, Sharia law that are protected by the First Amendment, just like the First Amendment protects other religions. So we're not talking about that part of Sharia. We're not talking about prayer and fasting and religious holidays. But it turns out that probably 80 to 85% of Sharia law is really a politically oriented. How do you behave? How do you live your life? So Sharia law as a political system has something to say about violence against women, female genital mutilation, polygamy, etc., etc. You can see the list of behavior on the right-hand side, which is clearly behavior outside of the scope of religion. Therefore, it's not protected by the First Amendment. And we have a problem when our leadership and directed by the leadership, our law enforcement shy away from enforcing the U.S. Constitution and Michigan law. These are criminal behavior. There's no question about it. And we're going to dwell on the subset of Sharia criminal behavior that directly affects women every day. Again, women who are Muslim, but also women who are not Muslim. We're going to talk about a number of topics. We're going to talk about the basic ideology about male supremacy. This is an absolute male supremacy way of behaving. We're going to talk about rape. These are difficult topics, but you need to hear. Again, remember, a policeman is learning this and has not had this conversation with his training officers for 8 years. We're going to talk about rape, honor killing, child marriage, forced marriage, FGM, and how does this affect the life of a policeman personally? Actually, sadly, the policemen hear for the first time from our retired police chief that they are targets. They have not had the training to hear that they are targets, their family are targets. The gentleman in the class that I attended makes specific reference to online Muslim Brotherhood documents, magazines that clearly identify the first targets are the police. In some cases, policemen have been listed by name and their families and their addresses have been given out to the Sharia-compliant people as targets. So this is very, very concerning to the police.